May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom and welcome all to our KosherTorah.com open forums. I am your host, Ariel Tzadok. Welcome to all of you live and those of you listening to this recording. We are here to discuss in this class the secrets of Purim, the teachings of the episode of the book of Esther, and how it is understood in a very profound light in the Kabbalistic mystical teachings of Rabbi Isaac Luria, the famous 16th century Kabbalist of Safed, Israel. I choose his understandings because I think that they have such a valuable social and political message, which, in my opinion, is vital for us in our understanding of religion today. You see, let's set some foundations of understanding what Kabbalah is and what it's not. Because without this foundation, everything gets lost. But then again, isn't that always the case? Isn't it always the case that whenever we look at something out of context of its origins, that it gets spiraled out of its original meanings into something which it never ever meant for it to be, and then people, without a connection to the original source, cling to, without any compromise, their new interpretation of things. And the case in point, and I mean no disrespect to anyone, but Christian reinterpretations of Jewish scriptures and applying them to become messianic prophecies, like Isaiah 7:14, the supposed virgin birth thing, which never really was. I'm not here to insult or offend or challenge or confront Christians about their beliefs. They are what they are. But look at the context of Isaiah 7 and then read Isaiah 8. There's contexts. And when you lose context, you lose the original purpose. And this is so absolutely true with regards to the mystical teachings which we call Kabbalah. Just today, just to give you a timestamp here, it is President's Day here in the United States, February 18th, 2013. And, again, just as a side note to reveal some of my mishugas, as we would call it in Hebrew, there's one president who never gets praised or honored, who in my opinion most certainly should. And that, of course, is President Jefferson Davis of the Confederate States of America, who was a decent, good man. And I'm not going to get into more about that right now. I was chatting about this before we began this recording. Just for the record, I don't accept the reinterpretations of history that have been written by the northern states in their aggression against the South. You've got to study the history. And if the stars and bars of the southern flag offend you, you need a history lesson. This is important, especially from a biblical point of view. Enough said. Let's go back to our text here. We're talking about Kabbalah. We're talking about a very involved, metaphorical, symbolic language, which, if you cannot break the code or understand the archetypes, you will never get to what the real message is all about. You see, and this is important, I'm going to quote to you where my opinion comes from the writings of the Baal Shem Tov himself. From the book Baal Shem Tov on the Torah, portion is Va'et Hanan Ot Samech Tet. Let me read it to you in the original Hebrew and then I'll paraphrase it. Okay? He says here, Pam Achad, Haya Harava Baal Shem Tov, Mochiach et Dan Achad, Al Ma Shediber Bekabbalah Berabim, Vehashiv Lo Ish, Mipnei Ma Mor Gam Ken Doresh Bekabbalah Berabim, Vehashiv Lo Harav, Ani Lomed et HaOlam Sheyavinu, שבעולם הזה ובאדם גם כן שייכים כל הדברים שנאמרו בספר עץ חיים. ולא שאני נותן להבין את הרוחני שכתב בעץ חיים. אמר מור, דורש כל הדברים ככתבן, אבל מור דורש כל הדברים ככתבן בספר עץ חיים. אם כן, אתה אוסר מרוחניות גשמיות, ואין הפה יכול לדבר למעלה בעולם הרוחני. Sum it all up and translate. The Baal Shem Tov once heard somebody speaking publicly about Kabbalah, and he told him, shut up. The guy pretty much said, what are you talking about? I mean, you teach Kabbalah publicly. And he says, oh no. When I teach it, I teach people so they'll understand that it's related to things in this world and things within within humanity itself. You're talking about all that worlds up there, what I call on the other side of the rainbow. Wrong! You are confusing things. You're trying to make the spiritual physical. You can't do that. You're misunderstanding the system. When he says that it's in man, we have a word for that today. Psychologically. In my many years of studying Jungian psychology, I see echoing between the teachings of Jung and the teachings of the Ariel. Now, let's speak a wee bit about Kabbalistic reception, what we call Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. Throughout all the pages of the Torah of the Ariel, it says that these are revelations of Elijah the prophet. Now, did Elijah the prophet come in flesh and blood, sit down and share a pizza with the Ariel, and sat down over some, cool Budweisers and shared about the secrets of the universe? I don't think so. That's not the way these things work. A critic would respond, well, there was no Eliyahu involved. It all came out of the mind of the Ariel. Well, you're right. It did come out of the mind of the Ariel. So let's talk about things that come out of the mind, like the beautiful art of a Leonardo da Vinci, the beautiful science that comes out of an Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla. How about what comes out of the mind of a Michelangelo, or the beautiful music that comes out of the mind of a Mozart, Bach, or Beethoven? It all comes out of the mind. And anybody who doesn't see the beauty and the inspiration in these things, gosh, I just guess you're blind. I don't know. I have no response to you. If you cannot look at works of classical art in breathtaking awe, the one that God, how did these guys do these things? You need to say, it's just a statue. It's just a picture. Okay, it's just music. Listen to Mozart. I have nothing to respond. I mean, how do you describe vision to someone who cannot see? Like the scripture says, eyes but do not see, ears but do not hear. I'm not interested in entering into debates with people who can't receive. But anyway, you must understand that Kabbalah is not a rational philosophical system. It is an art. It was the grasping of inner visions, impressions, pictures, archetypes, symbols, metaphors, that then were put into words, like the Baal Shem Tov teaches, to symbolize to us states of our own psyche. Not talking about out there on the other side of the world and the other side of the rainbow, but in us. So therefore, when I come to the teachings of the Ariel, this is a brilliant man. I don't know if he had connections with some force inside his mind from some other force. Oh, that's weird. That doesn't happen, does it? Did you ever hear of a great famous scientist, the man who, more than anyone else, in my opinion, is responsible for the 20th and 21st, maybe even the 22nd century? Professor Nikola Tesla. You go read about him. He says that his discoveries came to him through communications in his mind from aliens from outer space or some other place. Well, you might say, well, the man was a lunatic. Yeah? Well, the fact that we're talking today using technologies that originally have their source in Tesla, well, he's a pretty smart lunatic, I guess. What can I say? But then again, our sages say the line between prophecy and lunacy is very thin. So, Understand this, because we are talking now about vision. Again, I see this connection between the wisdom in the Ari'zal in the 16th century and Carl Jung in the 20th century. How could they be connected? I don't know. Just an interesting thing about Carl Jung, that in his autobiography called Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that at one time he had a heart attack or something. He had an out-of-body visional experience. And he claims that he had a vision of none less than Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Oh, wow. I know rabbis who would be jealous, who would love to have such visions. And here this non-Jewish, people have even accused him of anti-Semitism. Really? Having visions of Shimon Bar Yochai and an out-of-body experience? Pretty profound. They were both connected with something very much deeper in the human psyche, which Jung calls the collective consciousness. Understand that there is this collective body, and it's from this that Da Vinci taps into, that Newton taps into, that Michelangelo tapped into, that Bach, Mozart, Beethoven tapped into, that Einstein tapped into, that Tesla tapped into, that the Ari'zal tapped into, that Carl Jung tapped into, that Shimon Bar Yochai tapped into, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who wrote the Mishnah, tapped into, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, was tapped into. Tapping in. This is what all of what I tried to teach you all at KosherTorah.com is all about. Tapping in. Getting in touch. Because without this connection, you miss the beauty of what's being taught. Now, this is important to understand with regards to how the Ari'zal teaches about Purim. Number one, Purim, of course, is the holiday celebrated in the Jewish tradition based upon the episodes happening in the book of Esther in the Bible. Interesting that the book of Esther in the Bible is the only book that absolutely has no mention of God at all. And this is considered significant for a reason. Let's put things in a historical context. There is an opinion in Judaism today which contradicts reality and has to be confronted. The temple was indeed destroyed in the year 586 before the Common Era, BCE, and not at a later period. We know this because of all of the appropriate correlative historical records that we have. Do you know we still have records, historical records from like Greece, Rome, Babylon, and Assyria? You know, those old big cuneiform blocks and stuff. Yeah, it's still around. There's evidence. We know that Nebuchadnezzar, the man who destroyed Jerusalem, he died in the year 562 BCE. I'm going to take a wild guess that he had him destroy Jerusalem before then. He didn't come back as a ghost. Anyway, long story short, we read in the Bible about Cyrus. We read about Darius, and then we read in the story of Purim about Ahasuerus. Well, we know who Ahasuerus was. He is clearly Xerxes the First. You read about this, is all online. Xerxes the First began his reign in the year 486 BCE, which, mind you, is almost 30 years after Darius gave the orders to rebuild the temple way back when we read about in Daniel and Ezra and all the like. So there's this overlapping of history. By the way, Ahasuerus, as we know, the husband of Queen Esther, Xerxes the First, is also very famous for something other than the biblical story, and that was his attack on Greece, wherein which he faced the 300 Spartans. There you go, somebody in text got it. He faced King Leonidas, the Spartan king, at the Battle of Thermopylae. Okay? This is Xerxes. This is Ahasuerus. This is Esther's husband. So she's saying, where are you going? What are you doing? What are you fighting with the Greeks for? This is it. So if you ever see the movie, the modern version of the 300, which is so elaborate and drawn out, that's Achashverosh. And the way they portray him is this strange-looking guy. I don't think that's in any ways accurate, but whatever. Anyway, let's get back now to our story. The reality is, the Jewish community in Israel is already in the process of rebuilding. This is the historical period when the prophets Haggai and Zechariah and Malachi are living. Daniel, if he's still alive at this time, is obviously a very old man. And now, later, we find Mordechai. Mordechai, in our Talmudic traditions, obviously in touch with all of these people. And we have no reason to doubt that. Why? In all due respect, the communities in ancient Persia and ancient Israel, in spite of the fact that they were separated by, hundreds of miles, in all due respect, caravans went back all the time. Granted, they didn't have cell phones and internet connections, but they were still very much in touch. And that's the reality of the ancient world. When we read that King Ahasuerus was in charge of 127 nations, he had a big empire. Well, Xerxes had that. That's pretty true. All right? It says from Ethiopia and Africa all the way to India in Asia. And you had Jewish communities in all of them. This is historical records that there were Jews living in Ethiopia and Jews living in India, even in the days of ancient Persia. That's just the way we read it. But now, that's our history. We have a little bit of time. We'll discuss some of the laws of Purim, but I want to focus now on the teachings of the Ariel. Mind you, I have on KosherTorah.com this material already in print for you to read, because obviously in this class I only want to touch on the highlights of it. So if you go online to www.koshertorah.com/PDF in capital letters, all right, capital P, capital D, capital F, PDF, /lowercase Purim, PURIM lowercase PDF, you'll be able to get this essay. There's a link right now on the front page of KosherTorah.com, and I would encourage you. These are original translations that I wrote originally in 1995. How many years ago was that? 18? Wow, time flies when we're having fun. But anyway, let's focus on the issue. Again, if you want to read within the context, I'm just going to read to you the language, and then let's discuss it. So on page 3 of my translations here, translating from the Pri-Etz Chaim and the Sha'ar HaKavanot, I put them together, and this is what it's written. It is known that all throughout the period of exile, Nok, who is Rachel, stands back to back in relationship to Zah. However, it is known the time of the episode of Purim occurred at the end of the 70 years of the Babylonian exile. At this time, the act of rectification began, so as to restore them, Zah and Nok, to be in a face-to-face union, so that Israel can be redeemed. And in order for this to occur, Zah needs to fall into a dormita, which means a trance of sleep. What on earth? What is Zah and Nok? What are we talking about? It's such bizarre language, but no, it's not. Now, just for the record, if you need to follow Kabbalistic terminologies, I have an ebook available on Kosher Torah called Basic Kabbalistic Terminologies and Concepts. You can reference it there. But instead of trying to understand these things metaphysically in the, as I said, the worlds beyond the rainbow, understand that it's psychological processes within our own human collective consciousness. We are all connected as one. At that level, God speaks to humanity. Zeranpin, known as Zah, is said to be the God of the Bible, which is revealed to Israel in a supernatural form. We're very well aware of all the miraculous occurrences that happened in biblical times. Parting of the Red Sea and all the rest. Well, this is said to be an expression of God's, if we could say, supernatural face in a natural world. But because of our sins, that supernatural face is hidden, otherwise referred to as a dormitat, trance of sleep. It is explained that when we are righteous before God, we have what's called a face-to-face relationship with God. That means God faces us and we face God. That's called panim lepanim, face-to-face. However, when we sinned, symbolically speaking, of course, it is said that we turn our backs to God. Again, that's the symbol. And therefore God, looking upon us with His face, sees our backside. I don't know about you. If God sees us turning our backs to Him, that might tick Him off, get Him angry, wrath, thunder, lightning, and all the rest. So in order for God to have mercy, it is said symbolically that God turns His back towards us. Now remember, there's no such thing as backs and fronts. We're talking symbolically. Back and front are symbols for levels of intervention and interaction. During biblical times, God was very much involved supernaturally with us. Today, those supernatural powers are concealed in natural events. That's the nature of what we call this back-to-back relationship. We have concealed from us the supernatural revelations of God. That's a simple way of understanding this. So now, during this time, continuing in the text here, it states that Israel therefore appear to be disconnected from God because there's no supernatural intervention like that one time there was. Now, there are those people who are psychically aware, psychically intuitive, also have their hand, if you will, on the pulse of the collective consciousness of humanity and recognize this, and therefore take advantage to try to manipulate religion, people, psychology, for their own nefarious purposes. And of course, Haman was the case in point. But it's during this time that with that which we call what God reveals to us, that face called Zerampin, is subject to the higher, unknown, unseen forces within God. So, Kabbalah always speaks of God within the context of God the revealed and God the concealed. There is always God's essence and God's revelation. These should be basic concepts. They're referred to by deep and profound Kabbalistic metaphors like the small face, Zerampin, the greater or higher face, Ari'zal, corresponding to Sephirot like Tiferet or Keter, or Olamot like Atzilut or Adam Kadmon, blah, 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 blah. Don't get caught up in all the language. It doesn't matter. And they are also corresponding to levels within the human psyche, between what we can call the unconscious and the conscious minds. Well, as it's explained here in the teachings of the Ari, he states that during this period of this, in quote, trance of sleep, this concealment of God's supernatural face, it is not like God abandons us. Oh, no. But rather, the power of God the concealed, rather than manifesting itself supernaturally through a divine force over nature, instead of that, the power of God concealed comes directly into the human collective unconscious. It says it bypasses the mochin of above, bypasses Zah, and go directly into the head of Nok. I explain all of this in the essay in commentary form. You read it there. What it boils down to is very simple. We have the power. The reason why God turned his back towards us symbolically, remember God has no back, is so to give us the opportunity for us to do that which God himself originally did. In other words, originally God would do the miracles. Now in this period of time, God wants us to do the miracles. He gives us the power that was originally revealed supernaturally, and we reveal that same divine power naturally. And it speaks in our minds, and in our hearts, and in our consciousness, and guides us and directs us. And that's why the wise words of Benjamin Franklin, American founding father, ring true when he said, God helps those who help themselves. You see, in this period of time, that's exactly what God wants us to do. To take the bull by the horns, to take matters into our own hands, to do what we need to do. And God will bless us when we act for Him. We don't need to look to heaven for divine intervention in a supernatural way. On the contrary, we need to act with wisdom, courage, determination, passion, conviction. And with our determination that we are right in doing God's purpose on earth, God blesses our work. This is the message and the meaning of the book of Esther. We do the work, and God the concealed acts through our natural hands. And this is said to be the reason why God's name is not mentioned anywhere in the book of Esther. It could easily have been said with many of the examples. For example, Esther and Mordecai having a conversation. Mordecai says to Esther, hey, you better go and speak to King Ahasuerus and try to get this edict to kill the Jews annulled. Again, if you got to know the story of Esther, know what I'm talking about. Or else what? Help will come to Israel from another place. Another place? Why doesn't he just say God will provide? God will help. There's another place where it says that the king awoke by his dreams at night. How come it doesn't say, like it does with Pharaoh, and God sent Ahasuerus dreams? Not mentioned. God's left out. The writers of the scroll of Esther specifically left God out, even though he could have easily been mentioned, specifically to teach us this point. God is here, and God is there, and God is truly everywhere. Up, up, down, down, all around. That was a children's song they used to sing back in nursery school. Okay? God is everywhere. And therefore, if you look to see Him anywhere, He is there. I've given an example in these classes numerous times. How we've had interruptions from time to time. So, for example, maybe the puppy intervenes, barks, and does something. And I always say to you, don't go looking at these things as interruptions. We're being disconnected. No, you're not. You can't be disconnected. The nature of our connection to God is eternal. It's just that you're not aware of it. You think, you perceive there's a disconnection, but there's not. God is everywhere and everything in every way. And you got to be able to see it. That's why if you're connected and you have that intuitive insight, then you can see beyond the limitations of physical vision and see things that are not there to be seen. So, moving right along through the text. If we read the story, it reads like a novel of political intrigue. And I might add, if you read the story, it begins with Ahasuerus' feast. It's very possible that the feast spoken of in chapter 1 of Esther took place in the year 486 BCE, which is the year of Xerxes' inauguration, when he became king. This very well could have been his initial feast there. And at this time, well, we all know what was going on. And yet, the story happens with Queen Vashti. The king acts in a most disrespectful manner towards her, and she puts him in his place. But, as Mel Brooks would say in his comedy movie, it's good to be the king. He had to act against her, so for the sake that women should be respectful to their husbands. A lesson for women to learn to this very day. I didn't say submissive, I said respectful. And what about husbands being respectful to their wives? Well, we guys, we're not kings, alright? So we got to be equally respectful. That's just common decency and human nature. But moving right along, we all know the episode that happened with that. Esther is chosen out of all the women, and it just so happens that Mordecai is educated in multiple languages, and he could coincidentally, overhear the plotting of two of the king's guards who attempt to assassinate the king. Well, assassinations of kings in those days is very well known, so it's not far-fetched at all. Needless to say, Mordecai goes through channels, reports it. We all know the story. And only then does this guy Haman come into the picture. And we all know the story there. So moving right through the story, we know what happens. Esther has her feast, day 1, day 2. She then, let's go take a step back. Why didn't the king call for her for however many days? Well, obviously, it wasn't because he was busy. He probably had a whole bunch of new concubines that he had to break in. You know what I'm talking about. So, but Esther, she took her life in her hands. The king, showing a sign of human decency, respected her. We all know the rest of the story. Esther pleads for her life. Haman accidentally trips and falls on her, bed where she was lying, and it was like one of those long thrones. Just then, the king coincidentally pops in. We didn't even mention the fact that the king wakes up in the middle of the night and has a dream. That is weird. But what we're talking about are all natural events. The king hangs Haman, and then cancels the decree for the murder of the Jews. And the Jews celebrate. This is a dramatic pause. Oh, wait, no, that's not what happened, is it? No. What happened? Let's see. The king made a law that anyone who wants to rise up against the Jews and act violence against them, it's the racism day. You can kill whoever you want, take whatever property you want. There will be no legal ramifications. That was the law. And mind you, the law couldn't be, rescinded. So what then did the Jews of the day do? Well, if you remember, Mordecai's edict that the king signed was not to rescind the law, but rather it was to institute a new law. What was the new law? That the day before the enemies of the Jews could rise up against them to kill them, the Jews had first strike. Now, thank God that the Jews of the old Persian kingdom were not the leftist, liberal, weak, wimpy, castrated, emasculated Jews that exist today in the Western world, which most Jews are so frightened of any form of self-defense that they paint targets on themselves and welcome violent attack and prejudice due to their wimpy, emasculated self. Thank God for the state of Israel that put an end to the image, the icon, the archetype of the weak, defenseless Jew. Think about this. If you ever saw a Jew walking down the street, you're not afraid of him. All right? You pick on him, push him, spit on him. He's a Jew. But now let's say you saw an Israeli walking down the street. An Israeli who has experience in the Israeli army, in the special forces, years of hardened combat. And he's walking down the street. If you spit on that Jew, he might just, move away from you. Spit on that Israeli, he'll turn around and break your neck and rip your heart out of your chest. And then shove it down your throat. Big difference between the archetype of a Jew and an Israeli. And you had people like the person who was falsely considered to be a terrorist, Meir Kahane of blessed memory, who tried to inspire Jews to take upon themselves that Israeli mentality, the archetype of being strong, coining the term never again and the like. Well, in these days, in the times of the Persian Empire, Jews were not the weak, emasculated leftist liberals that they are today. Everyone apparently had their own arms. Mordecai's edict was that they could rise up and kill their enemies. No, God did not send a plague to strike them down. There were no plagues. There were no lightning bolts. There was no rescission of the order of Ahasuerus. The Jews of the day had to rise up with their own weapons. They had to rise up and act violently against their enemies who were boasting, preparing to come on in and kill them and take them over. And it was actually a blessing that the order of Haman came out first. Why? Because then all of the enemies came out of the woodworks. They were clearly identifiable who they were. No one had any reason to hide their racism and prejudice anymore. And then the tides were turned. The tables were turned right on top of them. So then, we knew. And we had the obligation, the responsibility to go after them. Not to speak to them. Not to reason with them. Not to seek a peace treaty with them. We sought them. We killed them. Their resolve was nothing but violence, hatred, and bloodshed. Well, then we responded in like kind. There's only one thing that the Jews in ancient Purim did not do. They did not steal the booty. They were not interested in financial gain. They recognized that the power of God was with them, that God blesses the hands of the strong. God blesses the hands of those who stand up and fight for their liberty, fight for their lives. And nowhere in the book of Esther is the name of God recorded. It doesn't have to be. Because God is with us. All we have to do is be with God. That's the great secret. And the Ari'zal reveals to us that this behavior and action on our part is the secret of redemption. That when we stand up for ourselves, God stands up with us. This is interpreted using our symbolic language, that we are therefore turning our faces back to God by acting for what is right and proper and true. And when God sees that, symbolically speaking, God has no eyes, remember? God then turns His face back to us. Now remember, this process takes years by our terminology, by our understanding. So, it might very well have been that the building of the Second Temple might have been complete in the days of Darius, in about ballpark the year 520, 515, 516 BCE. And the days of Mordechai and Esther, this story is maybe 30 years later. No contradiction scripturally or anything that we learn. But we must understand God's ways are not our ways. God's timing is not our timing. So, how long does the process of redemption take? Well, I know everybody's hopping, wanting it to happen like right now. God doesn't act like you and I want. I believe that we are in the process of redemption. I believe that humanity has evolved socially and culturally to such a point now that we are coming to that moment of crisis and transition, that point of no return, where we will burst forth into a great new age. And yet, as it says, it's always darkest before the dawn. Carl Jung writes about this as well, speaking about the irrational fears and violent prejudices that people experience prior to any growth of consciousness. Yeah, what we call revelation, enlightenment, consciousness, it's all the same. We are at such a point now in history. I cannot look at the establishment of the modern state of Israel as an insignificant thing. It clearly has significance. And let all the anti-Zionist black hatters, let them argue all they want. I mean, they have no connection anyway. The color of black, it's not only in their garments, it's elsewhere, but I'm not going to get into that right now. There are other strange, peculiar occurrences happening. We were entertained just months ago with the December 21st, 2012 date of the Mayan calendars, which ended their Baktun. Well, astronomically speaking, that date was exactly accurate. But the interpretation of what that meant was something different. If you speak to people who actually to this day practice the Mayan religion, and yeah, they're still out there, they'll tell you that it was the beginning of something new. And like every other birthing process, it takes time. Yeah, I believe that we are in the process of the redemption. But I might add that Isaac Luria, the great Ari'zal himself, in the 1570s, that's what, over 430 years ago, said that we were already in the end of days. Well, I know some people think the end of days is going to take 7 years. According to the Ari'zal, it's over 400 years. Maybe it'll be 500 years, maybe 1,000. Because the end of days is a psychological state of mind. And it materializes and manifests in the human psyche. And from there, into the human world body politic. So if we have our conspiracy theories out there, and whether it's the New World Order, or the aliens, or the inner earthers, or anyone else trying to take over, recognize and know this is all part of a greater scheme and a plan. All orchestrated by God, as He touches the collective consciousness of all humanity, and speaks to each to do their part and their share. And if that's what's going on, like I said, God is here and God is there and God is truly everywhere. Yeah, God's even guiding the nefarious hands of the New World Order, and maybe they themselves don't even know it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't speak to the New World Order people. They don't speak to me, so I don't know. All right, I got left out of the conspiracy, so what can I do? But now, understand this was an actual historical event that did happen. I believe actually there's even some peripheral extra-biblical material that actually speaks about this, but you go look that up. But we celebrate this day. And it's not the celebration of a revealed miracle, but a concealed miracle, just like it was with Hanukkah. Our hand did it. but God was with our hand. You can never ever forget the two. Our hand moves, God's with our hand to move. So when we move, God moves with us. We don't move, guess what? We've tied God's hands. That's the nature of this period of time, which we call exile. So now when we come to celebrate this holiday of Purim, we have certain laws and traditions. In the last few minutes here, I'm going to share with you our traditions, specifically from our Moroccan Sephardic traditions. Now, I'll mention specifically what is Moroccan, but in general, we all know that the day before the reading of the Megillah is something called the Fast of Esther. This year, when the fast, the Purim falls on a Sunday, we read the Megillah Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat. The fast is postponed to the Thursday, because we don't fast on the day before Shabbat. Under the circumstances, now these fasts are not as strict and meticulous as a fast like Tisha B'Av or Yom Kippur. There are many leniencies with regards to this fast. So anybody having any kind of a medical issue or any other reason can be exempt from the fast. This is clear in all the laws. People are pretty much in agreement across the board in that respect. If you have any questions or need not to observe the fast of Esther, which begins at sunrise to sunset, don't worry about it. Alright? It's not a big deal. But don't go around using that leniency as justification to say, what the heck? I don't need to fast, so I won't. If you're Jewish and you're going to observe the laws of our sages, then you fast. Technically, you should check the times online. You can go to a place like myzamanim.com. They'll tell you exactly the beginning and end times of the fast. It's not exactly from sunrise to sunset, but you'll look that up online. Now, moving right along, the Sabbath prior to Purim is called Shabbat Zachor. We have a tradition that on the Sabbath prior to Purim, we read from the Torah the portion about Amalek coming against Israel. This is considered the fulfillment of a biblical commandment because it says, you shall remember what Amalek did, don't forget. So by reading it, we're fulfilling the obligation not to forget. So this is considered very important. It is considered important enough that each community is encouraged to listen to the reading within their context of their own initial pronunciation, which means that an Ashkenazi should go to an Ashkenazi reading and a Sephardi should go to a Sephardi reading. And I know in many yeshivot, the religious schools even in Israel, in which they have large student bodies of both, that they would actually have two separate readings, one for each group of students. And I can't encourage enough that that is the way we practice it. So that's the way we do things, and that's the way it should be done. But now moving right along. The traditions, of course, as we are to read the book of Esther in the original Hebrew from a scroll called the Megillah, the Megillat Esther. Our tradition is to read it the night of Purim and the day of Purim. It is said that women are as obligated in this reading as are men. So therefore, the tradition is that women will either go to the synagogue to hear it read, or their husbands or some other person will come and read it for them. If there is no other person, yes, a woman can read it by herself without the blessings. And then again, if you don't have a Hebrew scroll, you shouldn't be reading with the blessings either. But now is an interesting little issue. The Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, writes that women should hear it from both at night and day. Now, you can read the Megillat Esther in Hebrew and fulfill your obligation even if you do not understand the language. And many people, of course, appreciate that form of it. If you do not understand Hebrew at all, you can read it in the language that you do understand, your native tongue. But if you do understand Hebrew, you do not fulfill your obligations to read it in any other language other than Hebrew. Some have the traditions of reading it in Hebrew in the synagogue, and they go home and read it in a vernacular English, Spanish, French, whatever, to their family. If you wish to do that, you can. Or you can just have the whole family go and follow along with a translation in whatever language. Now, the Moroccan tradition is outlined by Rabbi Shalom Massas, who is the chief of the Moroccan Jewish community in Israel, was the former chief rabbi of Jerusalem. He writes that women are not obligated to hear the reading of the Megillah during the daytime. He says that our Moroccan tradition is not like Maran Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Aruch. And he goes into a discussion as to why that is, but that's not really relevant to our place here. In my family, in our community here in Tennessee, I do read the Megillah. For those who wish to join us from all around, I read it at night, and I read it at day. And those who wish to join us are welcome. I do not require my wife or other women to sit and listen, but needless to say, most times they do anyway. So we can fulfill our obligations from all the different points of view. If you are reading from a kosher scroll, there are blessings to recite beforehand. And of course, if you have a minyan, then you can recite the concluding blessing as well. Now, there are other traditions with regards to this holiday. There is a tradition to give charity called Mechatzit HaShekel, the remembrance of the giving of the half shekel offering, which was done in temple times. Many people want to find out what was the exact value of this silver shekel and give that value, but that's not necessary. You go into the Code of Law, Shulchan Aruch, you will see that it states to give half of the value of the coin of your realm. So, here in the United States we have $1. So you can fulfill the obligation of Mechatzit HaShekel by giving just half $1 to charity. Of course, if you wish to give more, the blessing is greater. Here at KosherTorah, we are proud and honored to receive whatever donations anyone feels so gracious to give to us. Moving right along. There is, of course, the tradition of the meal of Purim. There are two traditions in this respect. The meal of Purim is, of course, observed during the daytime hours. A meal is considered that which is you bless with bread. However, unlike a Sabbath or a holiday, you do not have to have a double loaf of bread. You can easily say the blessing on a slice of bread. The tradition in many a community, like the Ashkenazim, is to have the meal late in the afternoon towards the evening. However, the Kabbalistic tradition is to have the Purim meal immediately after the reading of the Megillah in the morning at 10, 11 a.m. So it becomes like a brunch. That, of course, is the tradition that we here observe in my home and community, and others observe their own. Now let's talk about the issue of drinking alcohol. There is a mention that someone should be happy during this holiday, and that is interpreted as drinking alcohol. However, even though the text says that you should drink to a point where you don't know the difference between cursed be Mordechai and blessed be Haman, the opposite obviously, that's not to be taken in any ways literal. One is not to drink to excess, to the point where they can become a danger or an embarrassment to themselves or others. It is criminal, immoral, and evil to get drunk and, God forbid, drive a vehicle or anything else. So you will find many a religious leader telling people with regards to drinking, take it easy. If you're going to drink, make sure you are not driving. At our table here, we do not drink wine. We're in Tennessee. We have good old-fashioned moonshine here. And yes, I really have. I even have lemonade-flavored moonshine. So for those of you who are joining us at our meal, everybody's going to get a special little treat, as long as you're not driving. But anyway, that's the meal. Some people will eat it with meat. We're not meat eaters here. Eat it with whatever you enjoy. Now, the two other popular observances on this day are called Mishloach Manot, the offering of food, the gifts of food that we give to others. Now you can go online, you'll see everybody gives these food baskets today. Now, the essence of giving these gifts of food is that you should have one item that is actual food, that's going to be eaten, should be eaten during the festive meal, and a drink, something that would be drunk then. Many people today give baskets of candy and cookies and other types of sweets, which of course yummy yummy, but that's not exactly what the intent is all about. So if you are going to observe this tradition of giving gifts of food, make sure that it's an actual food item, something that people are going to eat, whether it could actually be bread, cake. To give a loaf of bread, home-baked bread, with something that the people could actually drink at their table. I'm not a wine drinker, don't give me wine, but maybe somebody else does. They have like little small bottles you can buy, they're very nice. That is a perfect basket. You can skip all the chocolates and all the rest of that stuff. It's not the essence of what this is all about. And of course, the other tradition is called Matanot Le'evyonim, the tradition of giving gifts of money or other sustenance to the poor. And that is very, very important to do, because what do free men do? Free men support one another. We have the liberty to do so. And that's really what this is all about. This holiday, like Hanukkah actually, is an expression of our human liberties and a celebration of the powers that God has given us and the salvations that come to us when we use that which God has already given in our hands. That sums up the entire Kabbalistic secrets of Purim. So as you see, it's a rather down-to-earth, practical, and relevant message. Would you get that by involving yourselves with the message and meaning of all these metaphors of a Zah and a Nok and a Dormitah and all this and that? You see, it gets lost in the translation. That's why we are thankful that we have such great rabbis like the Baal Shem Tov, who help us to understand that these must be understood internally, psychologically, and then applied socially, politically, and all which ways. This, like Hanukkah, is a holiday that celebrates human ingenuity, human independence, human strength, all given to us as a blessing from our divine and holy Creator, blessed be He. So yes, we have truly that which to be thankful for, truly that which to celebrate. And as we celebrate, as God gives to us, we give to others. That is what this is all about. And that is how we observe this. So I thank you all for joining me and listening in. I pray that you will take these lessons to heart and to hand, to act appropriately in your behaviors, in your daily lives, to take this message of the book of Esther, the holiday of Purim, and observe it 365 days a year, in everything and in every way. I'm your host, Ariel Tzadok. Thank you for joining me. Come see me online at KosherTorah.com. Thank you again. Shalom. 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 Thank you again.